So glad Paula loves the music. Hey, welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo-O. Paula is always the one who kind of test out the music, see if it's okay, see if it's worthy of playing on the devotion. But hey, welcome. My name's Bo. You are in the Morning Devo, and it's a little late, 10:46, but we're getting it in there. We're getting it going, and had a busy morning, but nice to be able to open up the Word and get in there and just do some reading. So that's what we're going to do this morning, and we're going to read it up, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So here we go. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 17. This is the last part of this wonderful chapter, kind of titled the David and Goliath chapter. So we're going to read it from, let's say we're going to start in, let's kind of backtrack just a titch. But it says, David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Talking about Goliath. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And they repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, that is what will be done for the man who kills him. Then Eliab, David's older brother, heard him speaking with the men, and he burned with anger at him and asked him, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." Man, what a trip, right? I mean, his brother seems off the charts, a little intense, right? I mean, he hears David talking to some of the military guys about what's going on, and they tell him, "Hey, this is what Saul says. Whoever challenges Goliath and wins him, they're gonna be able to get kind of the prize." Remember what the prize was? It was, I think, it was, one of them was the wife of, or the daughter of Saul, the king, and there was some other things too. Well, money, kind of, you don't have to pay taxes, kind of thing. And so David hears this, and he's talking about it like, "Hey, what's going on? Why isn't someone going out and fighting this guy?" And his brother gets on him, man. His brother says, "You're a conceited young dude." Whoa, have you ever been called names like that by someone in your family? Gosh, that's tough. It's rough when someone in your family is dissing you hardcore like that. And, they kind of calling you names, saying, "Hey, you're a conceited kid, why are you down here? Why aren't you hanging out with the sheep?" It's really a bummer. It makes me think, hey, have I done that? Have I called people names? Have I misjudged them? Maybe David did have some conceit in his life. Maybe his older brother saw some cockiness in King David. But maybe the older brother just misjudged David too. And this is something that we have to consider every day is, am I misjudging people? Maybe. But God, help me to see things accurately, rightly. Help me not jump to conclusions, misjudge, that kind of thing. My judgment can be really off, right? Sometimes I just have to commit people to God and just say, "Hey, God, you're able to judge them far better than me," right? But here, King David's brother does get mad, does call him some stuff. And King David says, David says, "Now what have I done? Can I even speak?" Then he turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. So David's saying, "Hey, man, someone's got to take on this giant probably. Hey, why don't I take on?" And they're going, "Hey, you cocky kid, you conceited little guy, you should be tending with the shepherds." Well, it gets back to Saul that his armor bearer, David, is a little cocky, is saying, "Hey, who's going to deal with this reproach of Israel?" And again, I think they're misjudging David. And I think that's what happens. Sometimes when I'm in fear, right? These people are in fear. They don't want to face Goliath. What do? Instead of maybe looking at their own fear and just saying, "You know what? We're afraid. And that sucks, but we are afraid. And we need to deal with our fear." Usually what we do instead of dealing with our own stuff is, what do? We attack other people. Isn't that weird how we do that? And that's what we see here in the Bible passages, right? It's not commended, but this is human behavior. We see it right here in the Bible. That's the beautiful thing about going through the Devos, is just we get to see how relevant the Bible is to our own life, our own behavior issues. And I think all of us can really relate to this one with David and his brother and the people around his brother. They're struggling with fear, but what do? They attack the one who thinks that, "Hey, we can do this. God's on our side. Let's go forward. Let's go for it." David had a friend, by the way, named Jonathan, who had the same kind of heart, Saul's son. They both had these hearts of like, "Hey, if God's on our side, who can be against us? Let's go for it. Hey, the mountain looks huge. How are we going to get over it? But God's on our side. I think we can do it. Hey, the moon's kind of far. But you know what? God's on our side. Let's go." Really radical attitude, right? But some people look at it as what? Conceit, right? But they're seeing it through their own fear, their own lens of fear. Instead of admitting their own fear, their fear is, because they got fear goggles on, they look at David's behavior as conceited. So David says to Saul, "No one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go against the Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man since his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by the hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine." So David has already kind of gone through some lives. You've heard of 9 lives? From, I think it was like a cat. Cats have 9 lives, right? That kind of idea. Well, David's already kind of cheated out death with a lion and a bear. And he sees that God's hand's in his life. Like, wow, dude, that was amazing. Like, I was taken care of, I was doing my job, and, this danger came, and lo and behold, I was victorious. And so, gosh, a lion and a bear? Well, I think I can take on this Goliath guy. He's not much different. And I think this is cool. Today, in my Devo, I want to always look back on what God has done in my life, so that I know he can do things in my future too. I know he's done this, so I know he can do that. I know God's with me there. I know he's been with me there in the past. So, hey, the future, I could trust God's going to be there with me in my future too. So I like that attitude. And I like that kind of way of rationalization, thinking, that he's not really, I don't know if he's rational. Yeah, he's being rational, right? He's saying, hey, this is what happened in the past. And so, hey, here's the future. And so Saul says to David, "Go and the Lord be with you." Hey, man, you want to go do it? Go do it. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off, and he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. So instead of us maybe picking up something that we're not used to, maybe we just have to stick with good old faithful, right? Maybe we just have to go back to what works, what we really know is going to get the job done. And sometimes, we try to put on someone else's armor and it just don't work, right? I can't be that person. I'm not going to be like that person. I'm not going to teach like that person. I'm not going to look like that person. I'm not going to have the same ways of articulating things as that other person. But you are you. And you have to just know what you're good at and then stick to it, right? And just hang out in that lane a little bit and just keep going, And this is what David does, right? That other armor of Saul's, man, that didn't fit him too well. And so he takes it off, and I love it. He puts on his, and that's cool. You got things that you're good at, stick to those things. In ministry, what are you good at? Stick to those things. What do you like to do? Stick to those things. Just hammer it away. Get better at that thing, And, I think you'll find it much more comfortable than if you try to, put on someone else's shoes, so to speak. And so he says, and it says, "Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. And he said to David, 'Am I a dog that you would come at me with sticks?' And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. 'Come here,' he said, 'and I'll give you the flesh give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field.'" So Goliath certainly talks a good game, right? And he definitely shares his heart to David. And David, though, David's comfortable. David goes, "Hey, I've gone to war like this, or, I've fought before like this. I'm very familiar with it." And, lo and behold, if you're good at anything, really good at it, if you're expert at it, you're going to win, right? I mean, if you got someone who can fight, just fight in general, but you got an expert, right, in just one thing, they're going to probably win that expert. And David's got something that's awesome. He's got a sling, and he's got beautiful stones that have been in the water for a long time that are just perfect. And he's so familiar with these things. He's been working on this forever. And thing is he doesn't have to get into a wrestling match with a giant, right? He can just from afar do amazing work, right? By using these things that are familiar to him. There's something in that, just in that application. You don't have to draw close to those things, some of those things that are maybe dangerous for you. You don't have to draw close to it. You can win the battle, right? Maybe from a distance. Meaning maybe just doing the things you know to do. Pray, study, read, worship, reach out. Those kind of things. And you pray, and man, things happen, right? You seek the Lord, things happen. Not necessarily that you got to draw so close, right? Sometimes we think the way we're going to fix something in our families, in our, with our kids, is by drawing close. We think like we have to be in their lives and everything. We have to know everything. We have to micromanage everything. And then we'll fix it. We will fix this. And it just doesn't work like that, right? Everybody has an autonomy to them. Everybody has decisions that they make. I can coerce a kid or an adult into not doing something. I can manipulate them by financial gain, money, doing different things to try to get them to do what I want them to do. But in the end, their heart is not in it. Their heart is far away. This is why God didn't make us robots, right? Not to manipulate, not to coerce, but to give us a will to be able to move towards Him, to desire God, right? Yeah, it answers that question. Why does God allow the things He allows? Well, because He wants us to volitionally make choices. He's given us an autonomy, and it's for that purpose of the upholding of love. Because, if you force someone to love, that's coercion, and that's not good. God's not into the coerced exploitiveness kind of relationship, right? So, yeah, I mean, Paula says, man, she's been an ICU hospice nurse for years and she's seen prayer work. Yeah, sometimes it's at a distance though, right? Like in this situation where Dave is going to fight, but he's going to fight from the distance, right? Tina says, be patient and waiting. That's right. Sometimes we just have to be patient, right? And not be so right there in the face. And so David says to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the one who created the heavens and the earth, right? The one who makes everything. The one who's already conquered Pharaoh and his armies. I mean, think of all the things that David are thinking of, right? And it says, this day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down, cut off your head. Today I will give your carcass of the Philistine army to the birds and the air of the beast of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword nor by spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give all of you into our hands. Oh, isn't that cool? The battle's the Lord's. Hey, what do I have to give the Lord today? The battle's the Lord's. What temptations? I have to give it to the Lord. The battle's the Lord's. What people do I need to give to the Lord? Give it to the Lord. The battle's the Lord's. I mean, you see how this works, right? Man, it's about God's name, God's fame, God's glory. God's got to do it. God's going to uphold His fame, His name, right? God's concerned about His glory, and God will get glory through me as I just realize that, hey, it's God's battle. It's God that needs to do it. God has to heal. God has to raise up. God has to fix. God has to change. This is God's working in people's life. It's not something I can do, right? I can just point people to the one who can make the change, and me surrender to God, the Creator, myself. So the Philistine moved closer to attack him. David quickly ran toward the battle line to meet him. And it says, reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into the forehead, and he fell face down to the ground. Now, Goliath was good in battle, no doubt, but, he was no match for an arrow, no match for a stone, right? Something flinging through the air. And isn't that amazing? Doesn't matter how strong you are, how burly you are, how much weight you can lift, right? You're no match for some things. You're just no match, man. We should never get too cocky, right? We might be really strong in one set, but we might be really weak in another. And, all of us, if something's flying through the air and it hits you, it's going to hurt. And it might kill you, right? And some weapons are there just to go through the air and kill you and strike you. And a stone traveling at a good rate of speed, smacking you in the head, lodging in your head, that'll do the trick for sure. So David ran and stood over him, and he took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the scabbard. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. Yikes. And it says, then the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, and they turned and ran. And the men of Israel and Judah surged towards him with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. And their dead were strewn along the Saharim road to Gath and Ekron. And when the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem, where he put the Philistine weapon in his own tent. Ooh, so he's got a head and he's got the sword. Ooh, pretty rough. Then Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine. He said to Abner, commander of the army, Abner, who is this young man again? Abner replied, surely as you live, O king, I don't know. And the king said, find out whose son he is. And as soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head. Whose son are you, young man? And David said, I am the son of your servant Jesse from Bethlehem. Wow, what a prize, right? Hey, this is what God's done. Check out the trophy I got. This is what God has done. And he brings it right before Saul, the king, the king of Israel, the one that the people liked, Saul. But David has already been said to be king by God. So here you have the king that God has chosen, and you have then the king that the people have chosen, and you have David showing the trophy, right? Isn't it amazing when we conquer fear, when fear gets dealt with and we overcome fear and we become courageous and we step forward and we see a victory? It is amazing that we have a trophy, right? We have something we can look back at and go, wow, man, this is amazing. So yeah, it is really, really, really neat to see that. This is about conquering fear in a lot of ways. The people of Israel were super fearful. Saul, super fearful. They weren't focused on the Lord. But David, he couldn't stop talking about God and what God has done in the past and what God was going to do in the future. The victory will be God's. You can count on it. It's going to be okay. God will get the victory. He already has promised that through his son, Jesus Christ. And so we need to just trust that, live in it, not try to control, not try to force, not try to coerce, not try to manipulate. Instead, we're free now to love. Isn't that cool? I'm free to love. I have to get rid of my fear, say what's on my heart, to the people I care about, but then I have to leave it. I have to leave it, let it go, right? Those kind of things. And then as I see God do great work, and it might be years, it might be 40 years from now, I don't know. But down the road, God will do that work, and I'll look back, man, and I'll have a trophy. I'll go, wow, look what God, and people might, my enemies might look at me and say, Bo, what are you doing? And I'll be able to show them a trophy. Hey, look what God has done. Very cool. God's a good God. He's got a plan for us. He's got a purpose for us. We need to learn to rest in him and trust him, especially when we have adversity before us. That's what we see David doing. It's a super amazing chapter, very Jesus-like. Jesus conquers our enemies for sure, right? He's the one who, overcomes fear by focusing so much on his Father, right? Fixated on his Father, he can conquer all things, right? He can forgive people when they hate him, and he can not manipulate, coerce, or use any of those things to try to get people to do what we want them to do, the kind of thing. And instead, Jesus loves, hands out, puts out his hands, right? And says, I love you. It's not manipulative, right? Try to find another person like Jesus. You ain't going to find it, right? Awesome. No secret things, no hidden things, just pure, beautiful love. So cool chapter. Love it. So glad you guys joined me on this late Devo. It's almost noontime, but you guys have a great day, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.